permits or approvals associated with the activity. So you kind of have to jump through two hoops. So you have to jump through the tribal hoop, and not all these birds are always available on tribal land. So you'd also have to go to the state and gain state approval to hunt or gather these birds um, for your federal permit to be valid. Um, so there's multiple things these participants and Hopi practitioners have to go through to obtain eagle feathers, and I know it's the same way for many tribes, that they have to go through multiple either permitting process or they have to wait a long time for their eagle feathers, and it can be a bit cumbersome and difficult to carry out your traditional religion. Additionally, there's with the smaller birds, I think that aspect of it is often overlooked, that the non-eagle bird use is often overlooked by these different permitting agencies or the different natural wild resources departments, because it's, the eagle is much more it's fauna that is, charismatic fauna is part of what an eagle is you see it in cartoons. They're especially eagles and hawks, they're used as team mascots, and so they're charismatic fauna. So when it comes to getting the most attention as far as permitting and gaining access to, you actually, even though they're very protected, you probably have greater access in getting permitting and just getting the feathers. Whereas you kind of have to search and put lots of extra effort into these smaller birds. Like, for instance, the magpie, I know it's only used once or twice a year, and it's just going to be one or two feathers that are used. So getting one magpie will basically last a person a lifetime, and it's only a few people. It's not every Hopi member, every tribal member are going to use magpies in their ceremonies. It only may be just a handful of participants who are going to need that feather, and they're going to have to go through a long permitting process, because the magpie is actually listed under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as a protected species under the Migratory Bird Act, Treaty Act. So they would have to go through the permitting process that I described before, through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then they'd have to jump through the hoops between the tribe and the state. Now, magpies are not very common on Hopi land at all. Like, you just don't see them. So they'd probably have to go to the state, and they're not even common in Arizona, so they'd have to go to another state like Colorado or Utah, or even further north where they're much more common. And then they'd have to get a permit, they'd have to go hunting for it. Just a lot of effort to get one bird that will probably last them a lifetime, but I mean, it's a lot of effort to practice your religion. I guess it is. I mean, these things were conceived of, I guess, or not conceived of, but I mean, just being Hopi takes a lot of effort in practicing the religion, because it's a year-long thing that goes on that you're doing all the time, and ceremonies are constantly coming up. But having the added burden of 2 applications, probably additional wait time, and just not knowing if you're going to be able to go and legally obtain these birds. I know of tribal members who have been prosecuted for just getting frustrated and going out and taking birds, and they get arrested, and the birds are seized, and then they're prosecuted. The ones I know of have mostly been prosecuted in tribal court, but in a LA Times article, they were talking about how the U.S. plans anyway, about the Hopi's plans to gather eagles at Wapatki National Monument, which is ironic that a lot of people were upset that the Hopis would get permits to hunt eagles on Wapatki National Monument, considering that the reason Wapatki National Monument exists is that the ancestors of the Hopi built all those ruins that the national monument's based around. And the reason visitors come to see it is because of the Hopis. They built those structures and buildings and that are there. They built them 900 years ago, but that's where certain Hopi clans came from and are descended from the people at Wapatki. And I guess certain interest groups that are environmentalists or animal protection groups were interested in this, but I believe the article says that there was 10 people or 10 Hopis during this time, and this article was written early 2000, October 29th, 2000, but up to that point there had been 10 Hopis that had been prosecuted for taking eagles without the proper permitting. And it's just that important to the Hopi people that I guess some people are just willing to risk it to be able to obtain those eagle feathers because they're such an integral part of Hopi practice and society. Now I agree that eagles are not an unlimited resource, but I think there's kind of a middle ground that tribes and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the government can maybe go about getting more eagles for the tribes to be able to use. I know it seems like it might be a weird idea, but I know they are able to raise and breed eagles in captivity, and if they're unwilling to give up more wild eagles to the tribes, I don't know if it would be viable, or I guess some people might find it amoral or whatever, because eagles are charismatic birds, and they call them charismatic megafauna, but whether they would be willing to maybe raise some eagles and hawks and birds that tribes need in captivity. I think it'd be a way for tribes to actually both add back to the natural wildlife that exists and create opportunities to practice their religion. I guess I've gone about 23 minutes here, so I'm going to stop. I've discussed lots of issues. Yeah, I had to do this in my basement gym because my kids are upstairs. I don't know if you've heard them off and on. They're making lots of noise. But thank you for listening. Again, I'm Pierre Himmel, and I talked about the eagles, or the issues of eagles and the Hopi tribe and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and the Bald Eagle Protection Act.